Am I the a-hole for telling my husband's affair baby's family to either come get the kid or I'm calling CPS? My F53, soon-to-be ex-husband Roger, 47, whom I forgave for his affair, came home with a baby 4 months ago. It was an afternoon that changed the entire trajectory of my life, though at the time, I was remarkably calm. I remember the sound of the front door opening and the distinct, high-pitched wail that followed, a sound that hadn't echoed in our hallways for over 20 years. Roger walked into the living room looking like he'd seen a ghost, carrying a car seat and a diaper bag that looked brand new. His girlfriend, 22, could not handle it anymore and brought the baby to him at work and left. Apparently, she had reached her breaking point with the reality of newborn care. She walked into his office, placed the carrier on his desk, and told him it was his turn. To the best of his knowledge, she is in Spain. She didn't leave a forwarding address or a phone number that worked. She just disappeared, leaving Roger with the living proof of his betrayal. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I had already done all of that a year ago, when the affair first came to light. I had chosen to stay then, working through the pain, trying to salvage the decades we had built together. I thought we were past the worst of it. But standing there, looking at that infant, I felt a switch flip inside me. The forgiveness I had painstakingly cultivated evaporated. I allowed him to stay so long as I didn't have to do anything. Anything. I was very clear about that boundary. I told him, he can stay in this house because I am not heartless enough to put a baby on the street, but he is your responsibility. I will not feed him, I will not change him, and I will not wake up in the middle of the night when he cries. Roger agreed, desperate to keep his family together while figuring out how to be a father again at nearly 50. For 3 months, it was a bizarre, tense coexistence. I lived my life, went to work, met my friends, slept through the night, while Roger struggled. He was exhausted, juggling a high-stress job with a newborn who didn't sleep. I watched him fumble with bottles and struggle to fold a stroller, and I felt nothing. No pity, no urge to jump in. I had raised my children. I had done my time in the trenches of motherhood, and I wasn't going back, especially not for the child of the woman who nearly destroyed my life. Well, about a month ago, Roger had a heart attack. It happened in the kitchen while he was trying to prepare a bottle. I heard the crash and found him on the floor. I called 911 and I followed the ambulance to the hospital. It didn't kill him, more's the pity, but he is very weak and incapable of doing anything for himself. The doctors said it was the combination of age, stress, lack of sleep, and underlying issues. When he came home, the reality of our situation shifted. Since he isn't up and about, he cannot care for his child. He also cannot drop off and pick up his son at daycare. He can barely walk to the bathroom without getting winded. The baby was crying. Roger was gray-faced and clutching his chest in the recliner, and the house was falling into chaos. I have been helping, but I'm done. For the last few weeks, I found myself doing exactly what I said I wouldn't. I was the one waking up at 4 a.m. because Roger couldn't get out of bed. I was the one rushing from work to the daycare before they closed. I was the one buying formula and wiping spit up off my clothes. Every time I looked at that baby's face, I didn't see an innocent child. I saw the lies, the hotel rooms, and the betrayal. My kids are full grown. I shouldn't be having grandkids anytime soon. I do not have any desire to care for a baby. The resentment was making me physically ill. I realized that by helping, I was just enabling a situation that was never going to work. Roger isn't going to be back to normal for a long time, if ever. I am 53 years old. I was looking forward to my golden years, to travel, to quiet mornings. Instead, I was trapped in a nightmare of someone else's making. I told Roger that I wanted divorce. I sat him down in his recliner, turned off the TV, and told him it was over. He tried to argue, tried to use his health as a guilt trip, but I was stone cold. I told him I was done being a martyr for a man who didn't respect me enough to be faithful. Then, I contacted the mother's parents. I know the father through friends in our community. It's a small enough circle that I knew exactly who they were. I called them up and didn't mince words. I explained that Roger was incapacitated and that I was leaving. I said they had until Friday to come get their grandchild, or I was calling Child Protective Services. The conversation was explosive. They screamed at me, called me a monster, and told me that the baby was family. I told them that if he was family, they should have no problem coming to get him. I explained that I am not the mother, I am not the legal guardian, and I have no legal or moral obligation to raise their daughter's mistake. The days leading up to Friday were some of the most stressful of my life. Roger was crying, pleading with me to change my mind. My phone was blowing up with messages from his side of the family. I ignored them all. I packed my things quietly, one box at a time, and moved them into a storage unit. They just left with the baby. The grandparents showed up with a car full of baby gear and faces full of loathing. They didn't even say hello to me. They went straight to Roger, who was sobbing in the living room. As they were packing the last of the diaper bags, they scolded me for being so cold towards a baby that had done me no harm. They looked at me like I was something they'd stepped in on the sidewalk. I didn't argue with them. I didn't try to defend myself. I just stood by the door and waited for them to leave. I view that child differently. To them, he's a grandson. To me, he is the physical manifestation of the most painful period of my life. I cannot love him. I cannot even like him. Roger is recovering, and I will be moving out. Now that the baby is gone, the house is eerily quiet. Roger spends his days staring at the walls, and I spend mine finalizing the last of the paperwork. The house is in his name, but I have never contributed to it. We had an arrangement early on where he handled the mortgage and I handled other things, but I was smart. I have the equivalent of 22 years of rent and interest put away. And as per our prenup, my savings are my own. I knew the value of my own independence even when I thought we were happy. I work and I don't need anything out of this marriage except myself. I don't want the house. I don't want his retirement. I just want my peace back. My kids tried telling me to stay and help their father. They are 24 and 26, and they have a very idealized version of what family means. They told me I was being cruel to a sick man. I didn't lose my temper. I simply sat them down and asked them if they were ready to take a leave of absence from their jobs to come care for their father and their half-brother. I said that they were welcome to come over and help him with cleaning himself and the baby. Both declined what I felt was a fair offer. It's easy to advocate for kindness when you aren't the one cleaning up the mess at 3 a.m. I do not feel that I am acting badly, however. Roger, our children, his child's family, and a few mutual friends think I am. They see a sick man and an abandoned baby and a cold woman walking away. I see a woman who gave 25 years to a man who cheated, and a woman who refuses to give the rest of her life to a situation she didn't create. Perhaps writing this out and seeing the responses will give me clarity. Update. I am no longer divorcing Roger. There were complications from his heart attack, and he has passed away. I am conflicted. He was the love of my life, but also a cheating piece of trash. The last few weeks have been exhausting in ways I don't think I can properly explain. Things declined very quickly after my original post. Roger had already been weak after the heart attack, but he started having breathing problems and additional complications while still recovering. He ended up back in the hospital, and despite everything that happened between us, I was still the person the doctors contacted because I was legally his wife. My children rushed to the hospital immediately. I went as well. Whatever anger I had toward him did not erase over 2 decades of history together. Sitting there while doctors explained procedures and risks felt surreal, considering that not long before, I had been planning my exit from the marriage and apartment hunting online. Roger was conscious for parts of it. Some moments were lucid, others were not. He apologized more than once, though by that point there was really nothing meaningful left to say. The affair had already destroyed the marriage long before his body gave out. He passed away 3 days later. The funeral arrangements fell mostly onto me because our children were emotional wrecks and because, despite the state of our relationship, I was still the spouse everyone expected to handle things. I organized the service, dealt with paperwork, met with funeral directors, contacted relatives, and handled condolences from people who had no idea what had actually been happening inside our marriage during the past year. A few mutual friends who criticized me after my original post suddenly became much quieter once Roger died. Some apologized for how harshly they judged me regarding the baby situation. Others avoided the topic entirely. To the best of my knowledge, the mother will not return from Europe. The child is currently with her parents. About a week after the funeral, her parents asked to meet with me. I agreed because there were practical matters to discuss involving Roger's estate and the child's future. The conversation was awkward from the beginning. They looked exhausted and, honestly, older than the last time I saw them. Caring for an infant full-time clearly was not something they had planned for at this stage of their lives either. They asked me what I wanted to do. I recommended adoption. Not that I adopt the child, that they put the child up for adoption. They didn't like that suggestion. Neither did my children. My son accused me of treating the child like garbage that needed to be gotten rid of. My daughter cried and asked me how I could be so detached after living in the same house as the baby for months. I reminded both of them that I never agreed to raise that child and that nothing about Roger's death changed the reality of the situation. People seem determined to rewrite history now that he is dead. Roger cheated on me with a woman young enough to practically be our daughter. He brought home a baby created during that affair after the mother abandoned him. Then he became too ill to care for the child himself, and suddenly everyone expected me to sacrifice the remainder of my life cleaning up a situation I did not create. I helped more than I ever wanted to already. I drove that baby to daycare more than once. I bought formula when Roger was too weak to leave the house. I sat awake listening to screaming at 2 in the morning because Roger physically could not get out of bed fast enough. I did those things because I am not cruel enough to neglect an infant standing 10 feet away from me. That still does not make me the child's mother. The maternal grandparents told me they are too old to raise another child long-term, but they also feel guilty putting their grandchild into the system. They asked whether I could at least consider partial custody or guardianship because the baby already knows me. I said no. My children became angry again after hearing that conversation. Both told me that if the situation involved one of my biological grandchildren, I would step in without hesitation. They are probably right. But this is not my grandchild. This child exists because my husband betrayed me. I suggested that since the child was related to them and not to me, that they step up. Neither has accepted that suggestion either. That part is what frustrates me the most. Everyone keeps talking about compassion and family responsibility while volunteering absolutely none of their own time, homes, money, or freedom. My daughter has 2 teenagers already and says she cannot handle another child. My son travels constantly for work. Yet somehow I am selfish because I refuse to spend my remaining years raising an affair baby at 53 years old. Roger left no updated will after the affair became public, so legally I was still the sole beneficiary of his estate. I imagine lawyers will be involved in getting the child some sort of support. I already spoke with an attorney regarding the likelihood of a claim being filed on behalf of the child, especially if paternity documentation becomes part of probate proceedings. I have no intention of fighting what the court determines is legally owed from Roger's estate. His choices created this situation. His child should receive whatever portion the law says belongs to him. I will pay whatever is ordered by the court out of the estate. I will not pay 1 cent out of my money. That is all I have to say on this matter. Update 2. A lot has happened since my last update, and honestly, I am exhausted by all of it. I truly thought once Roger passed away that things would settle down, but instead it somehow created a whole new layer of arguments, guilt trips, and legal complications that I never wanted any part of. The girl's parents finally did the right thing and cut her off. I had passed along their contact information to several dozen Redditors who seemed eager to help. Just an email. I did not reveal their identities or even their names. I believe this pressure convinced them to act. Apparently, before this, they were still sending her money regularly while she stayed overseas pretending she was somehow finding herself, while leaving her child behind for everyone else to deal with. I do not know the full details of what was said between them because frankly I do not care enough to ask, but from what I gathered through the lawyers and through my children, her parents finally reached a breaking point after months of excuses, avoidance, and pretending the situation would somehow magically resolve itself without her involvement. The pressure from outside people probably embarrassed them as well. I know some people here will think that was cruel, but the reality is that everyone involved kept trying to push responsibility onto me while the actual mother was off in Europe living her life. I was somehow being painted as the villain because I refused to raise my dead husband's affair child at 53 years old. I spent months being treated like some kind of monster for refusing to sacrifice the rest of my life, cleaning up a situation I did not create. Meanwhile, the people actually biologically connected to the child kept finding reasons not to fully commit either. Funny how easy it is to volunteer someone else's time, money, and emotional labor. Things became more complicated after Roger's funeral. I kept the service small because that is what my children wanted, and honestly, I did not have the emotional energy for some large dramatic gathering full of fake sympathy and whispered gossip. A few of Roger's friends attended, some coworkers, some family. The child was not there, which was probably for the best considering the tension already surrounding everything. My son barely spoke during the entire service. My daughter cried more than I expected her to. I think both of them were grieving 2 different versions of their father at the same time. The man who raised them and the man who destroyed our marriage with a 22-year-old woman. That kind of thing does not untangle itself neatly. After the funeral, both of my children tried again to convince me to reconsider my position regarding the baby. Not necessarily to adopt him myself, but to be involved because Roger would have wanted all his children connected. I asked them what exactly that involvement would look like. Neither had an answer beyond vague emotional statements. I asked if either of them planned to take custody.
No.
I asked if either of them planned to contribute financially in any significant way. Also no. My daughter admitted she still believed I was being too cold, but when I pointed out that she lived 3 states away and worked 60 hours a week already, she went quiet. Reality sounds very noble until someone has to rearrange their entire life around it. Between her parents no longer funding her and the current climate in Spain against visitors, the child's mother has returned. From what I understand, she was not happy about it either. Apparently, she expected her parents to continue bankrolling her indefinitely while they handled the child situation back home. Instead, they finally told her that if she wanted to keep living like a carefree tourist, then she needed to figure out how to pay for it herself. Amazing how quickly priorities change when the money stops flowing. I have not met with her personally since she came back, and I do not intend to. The only interaction we have had has been through lawyers. She apparently wanted to speak to me directly at one point because she wanted closure. I declined. I have no interest in listening to a woman barely older than my own children explain why she slept with a married man and abandoned her baby afterward. I have washed my hands of the entire situation, except for one thing. I have spoken with the lawyers, and I will be splitting some of Roger's estate into 3 parts for the children. My children will get theirs immediately as they are adults. The child's money will be going into a trust with his brother and sister as the trustees. This was not an easy decision, but after sitting with everything for weeks, I realized the child should not suffer financially because his parents were selfish idiots. That does not mean I suddenly feel maternal toward him or want involvement in raising him. It simply means I am trying to handle the estate fairly and in a way that avoids years of ugly legal battles. My attorney actually seemed surprised I agreed to it voluntarily. Apparently, these situations can become unbelievably vicious once inheritance gets involved. I wanted this resolved cleanly and legally so nobody could accuse me later of stealing from a child. My children were initially very emotional about the estate situation because they assumed I was going to divide everything equally without protections in place. I explained that the trust protects everyone, including the child himself. If his mother suddenly decides she wants access to Roger's money, she will not be able to drain it recklessly. The trust will cover education, healthcare, housing assistance when he is older, and other major expenses approved by the trustees. Whether my children actually wanted this responsibility is another matter entirely, but after months of insisting I should step in, I felt it appropriate they take on some role themselves. Interestingly, their attitudes shifted once legal paperwork and long-term responsibility became real instead of theoretical. This will take some doing, and as such will mean more money goes to the lawyers. Perhaps Shakespeare was correct with regards to that profession. The estate process itself has been aggravating. Roger apparently had more financial loose ends than I realized. Old accounts, insurance complications, debts connected to business investments I barely knew existed. Every week seems to uncover another form that needs signing or another conversation with attorneys billing by the hour. At least the house issue ended cleanly. Since it was legally his property before our marriage and protected through the prenup, there was never much question there. I have already secured my own place. It is smaller, quieter, and honestly exactly what I wanted at this stage of my life. For the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe in my own home without resentment sitting in every corner. My children are now less enthusiastic about their young sibling, but that is neither here nor there. They were the ones who insisted I involve myself. I do not say that cruelly. It is simply true. They viewed the situation emotionally at first because grief tends to blur practicality. Once they realized involvement means court appointments, trustee responsibilities, possible future conflicts with the mother, and years of management, reality settled in quickly. That does not mean they hate the child. They do not. But there is a difference between feeling sympathy for someone and restructuring your entire life around them. As for me, I am done restructuring my life for other people's bad decisions. If there is anything left when I pass, they can split that between themselves, as I will not be leaving anything to that child. Thank you all for your help in my reaching clarity. I was letting my anger cloud my judgment and sense of fairness. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Daily Tales Update.